In this lesson, we're going to add some AJAX code to our page to make our links smarter and more useful. We're going to start off in our HTML page by adding a script tag because this page is going to need to bring in some JavaScript in order to use JavaScript. So that should be straightforward by now. Script source equals script.js. The type is text/JavaScript, and then we want to end our script tag. And that is the entire change that needs to be made to our HTML page at this point, or at any point. Our CSS file is fine. We updated everything in the previous lesson that needs to happen to the CSS file. Now we need to create a blank script.js file to contain all the code we're about to write. If you're following along with the exercise files, we're looking at AJAX/chapter04/03. And if you also have access to the exercise files, you'll see that there's a folder inside chapter 04 called code snippets. We're going to grab a couple of code snippets out of there pretty soon. You'll want to do that so you don't have to type it all yourself. But first off, we'll do our usual onload. Window.onload equals init_all. We need to create our XHR variable globally because we're going to want to use it in several different functions. And then because we need to know where to put up our little preview window in several functions, we're going to create an X and Y pos pair of coordinates. Var X pos Y pos. And that creates our coordinates that we can now use later globally. Here's our init_all function. We want to look for all links. We need a list of all the links in this document. And that's simple to do. You say all links equals document.get elements by tag name. And you want every A. That gives you everything. That's an array. We now want to loop through this array. We're going to loop on I, so long as I is less than all links dot length. This should be pretty familiar to you. If not, you want to go back and review some of the JavaScript course. We now want to increment I, so we'll go through once each time. There's our loop. Inside there we want to set all links sub I dot on mouse over equal to show preview. So now we're going to need to add the show preview function. Here's the show preview function. And because it is called based on an event, and we're going to need to know details about that event, it's being passed a parameter, even though you don't see it necessarily. You didn't see it up here. It's automatically passed that event. Here's that. And we want to start off by saying if we know something about the event variable it just got passed in. If it's null, then we're going to do some things. If we're finding it, we're going to do other things. So if event, we're going to create the URL variable. The URL variable will be set to evt.target. What this does is it says, you moved over a link. What was the target of that link? If we go back to our HTML page and look at it, you'll see that the target of each link is the URL of the article. So that we don't have to write a whole new script every single time, we're just going to take the destination of that link, grab it from the event, and use it as the URL we want to read in via AJAX. If the event handler wasn't passed in that way, which is true of certain browsers, we have an alternate plan, which is we just set evt equal to window.event, which will contain the information we need now. And then we set var URL equal to evt.sourceElement. And that's again where our URL came from. The other thing we need to do is set our X and Y coordinates. So xpos equals event.clientX and ypos equals event.clientY. And that is everything we're going to need to do in terms of setting up our X and Y coordinates and our URL. There's one more piece we want to add here, and that is the actual AJAX functionality itself. We don't want to have to type in that same bunch of code over and over again, so I'm going to go grab it from the code snippets folder in Chapter 4. And if you have access to the exercise files, you should also. I'm going back to look at my files, and here in the code snippets folder is AJAX request.txt. I'm going to open that up, and there's some comments at the top about what you're going to want to do with it. But in this case, we know all we're going to want to do with it is just drop it in. So I'll copy it, go back to my .js file, and paste it in here. Clean it up a little. What we're doing, for those of you who don't have access to the exercise files, we're saying if this browser has window.xml HTTP request, we've already created the new XHR variable. Now we're going to assign a value to it. The value we're going to assign is that of a new XML HTTP request object. Otherwise, if we're in IE6, we want to check and see if there's a window.ActiveX object. If there is, we're going to try and create a new ActiveX object of the type Microsoft.xml HTTP. And if there isn't, there'll be an error here. So we come down here. If XHR, that means we successfully created this. Then we want to set onReady state change to the show contents function. That means anytime our ready state changes, we want to call show contents. We open up our request. We're going to want to do a get. We already have the URL set, and we pass a value of true because we want this to be asynchronous. And then finally, we send off the request. That's going to go talk to our server. If it didn't work, we throw up an alert saying, sorry, I couldn't create an XML HTTP request. So the one last bit of code we need to add here, as you might have guessed by now, is our function show contents. And again, we can go out to our snippets folder and open up AJAX response.txt. We've done the request, now we need to do the response. Here's the code we want. Copy it, move back to our JS file, and paste it in. What this code does is it checks to see if the ready state is 4. Again, that means that it's okay, everything's good. If the status of the request itself is 200, that means it found the file just fine. Then we're going to set outMessage to be response.txt. That's the text version of the XML HTTP request. Otherwise, we're going to set outMessage to say there's a problem with the request, and then give the status so we know a little bit more about what's going on. And from the snippet, we grabbed that comment that says, do something here with outMessage. That's what we're going to do, and that's actually all we're going to have to do. That's going to be the very last bit. First off, we're going to declare a new variable called prevwin, so we don't have to type something in over and over again. And that's going to be set to document.getElementById previewWin. If you want to type in document.getElementById over and over and over again, you can, but I'd prefer not to. Now we want to set prevwin.innerHTML. And as you might guess by now, that is outMessage. But now we need to put it somewhere precisely. We do that by saying prevwin.style.top is parseInt. That gets the integer value of whatever variable we pass, and it's going to be ypos. Remember, we set the ypos and xpos up above. We're going to take that, add 2 to it, and then we also have to end it with px, because style.top requires a number followed by the string px. We'll do the same thing for prevwin.style.left, and that's equal to parseInt xpos plus 2 plus px. What's coming in xpos and ypos are the same strings that we're setting up here. So for instance, if ypos comes in as 25px. We want to take that 25, add 2 to it to make it 27, and then add px to the end of it so that it becomes 27px. What this is going to do, because we were at certain coordinates, if we're adding 2 to the top and we're adding 2 to the left, that's going to put it slightly down and slightly right of our mouse. And that's where we want our little window to show up. We're setting prevwin.style.top and prevwin.style.left to be the x and y coordinates a little bit down and to the right of where our cursor moved over the link, because that's where we want the little preview window to show up. If you wanted the preview window to show up somewhere else, you would just change how you're setting top and left. What we're doing is taking in y pause and x pause. Those are going to be strings just like the ones we're creating here. So for instance, if it's at, say, x pause and y pause of 25px, 25px, you want to take the integer part of 25px, which is 25, add 2 to it for 27, and then concatenate px at the end to come up with 27px. If you put that into prevwin.style.top, that tells the browser to show that window at that particular location. There's just one thing we need more to actually add something at that particular location, and that's we need to set prevwin.style.visibility. Remember we said before it was hidden? Now we want it to show up. You have to tell the browser to make it visible. And that's all you need to do to make it show up. The problem is that if you made it show up every time you moved the cursor anywhere onto a link, you'd have a window showing up. Now we want to make the window be able to also go away. And we'll do that here. prevwin.onMouseOut. That means when we leave the preview window, when we move the cursor away, we call function. This is going to be an anonymous function because it's a single liner. So might as well just stick it in. And it's just document.get element by ID preview win.style.visibility equals hidden. And that's all there is to show contents. We're checking the ready state, then we're checking the status. We're setting up out message to either be our value of what we read in or an error message saying there was a problem. We're creating prevwin to contain our little preview window. We set its inner HTML. We set its top and left values. We set its visibility to be visible. And we gave it a way to go away after it's been created and we've looked at it. So let's save that. And then we go back to our HTML file and we preview it in the browser. And now when we scroll over each of these links, the first part of the new page appears and then disappears as we move away. And that, simply enough, is how you do smarter links with AJAX.